We put forward an entire package of ethics reforms in New Jersey to end dual office holding, to end people having more than one public job, to increase financial disclosure, to end pay-to-play finally, and to strengthen all the financial disclosure that everybody has to make, not just me, but all the members of the legislature too. We proposed that on September 8th. Not one of those bills on ethics reform has even gotten a hearing. Since September 8th. Not one of them has gotten a hearing. That's how much the majority in this legislature care about ethics. Not one. And I know a little bit about this given what my job was before I became governor. Put 130 politicians in jail for breaking the law. The way we stop that is to have transparency into what they're doing. Next week, we'll talk a little bit more about this, we put forward a comprehensive plan to reform pensions and benefits in this state for public employees. Our state pension system is $54 billion underfunded. The state health benefit system for public workers is $67 billion underfunded. And we put forward a very specific, common sense plan to reform pensions and to cut that deficit in half over the next 30 years while maintaining those pensions for people who are now getting. We proposed all those things in September. You want to know how much the legislature worked in September? The Assembly had one voting session in the entire month of September, and the Senate, they were twice as hard working. They had two. They had two. And understand, the majority decides when they come to work and when they don't. So, who's working and who isn't? In October, they needed a little break. Because they had one voting session in the Assembly in September, but they had two in the Senate. So I think the Senate understood, wait 1 second. These are supposed to be equal chambers here, and we're working a little too hard. So in October, the Assembly, consistent as the day is long, had one voting session in October. The Senate said, well, we're not anybody's dope. So we're going to have one in October too. So they cut their workload in half in October in the Senate, and I continued to ask them to take up pension and benefit reform, but since they were only there once each, they didn't have the time. Yeah, the Assembly did some things in November. They did pass A 2664. Which revises the penalty for destruction of or damage to trees, saplings, shrubs, or other plants. Because as you know, there's a scourge in New Jersey of folks going around and damaging trees and saplings and shrubs and other plants. It's one of those things that's driving law enforcement crazy in New Jersey. These tree vandals, they need to be brought to justice. And the Assembly, hearing the will of the people, decided to pass A 2664. So they did that, though, and they remained consistent in terms of how hard they're working. In November, the Assembly had one voting session, and the Senate said, hey, sounds pretty good. Let us do one, too. So, again, 2 days, one each. They also did some work in December. I mean, they did reach a bipartisan agreement with us, and this is an important one, on arbitration reform. And we did that in December. We did it together. They voted on it, and it's going to help municipalities, help mayors like Mayor Reyna be able to deal with the arbitration system in a much more effective and efficient way. And that was really good work. They also did add restrictions to the sale of lottery tickets because, you know, they had to do something silly because they were actually working, so they had to do something. And they also created new penalties for boat permit violations on Greenwood Lake. Because I know you're all concerned about that too. And the Senate must have resolved to work harder because they actually came 4 times And the real proof that they all made that resolution was the Assembly actually came twice. So they broke their one-a-month streak to actually come in twice. And we did some things in January. We approved 23 new charter schools. It was the largest approval ever in 1 year to try to bring some more choice for folks across the state. Still, in February, they went, see, this is what happens to me with the weight loss thing, right? In February, they went back down to one voting session in the Assembly and one in the Senate. It's kind of like my gym visits, that's what happens. So in February, you go, yeah, all right. It's cold, I don't want to go outside. Maybe if I got a gym in my house, I would do better. Then you spend the money on that and don't do it. So that's what happened then in February. In March, we put forward a veto that established the end, or we hope will establish the end of this mandatory early release program. And some of you may have read about this. You know, there was a bill that was passed and signed by Governor Corzine on his last day in office that mandated the early release of prisoners regardless of their crime that they committed. We've had violent criminals be released back out onto the street under this program. And we've tried to get it stopped, and the legislature won't stop it. And so now, 2 of the people who were released early have committed murders. 2 young people, one in Newark and one in Camden, were murdered. One in their 20s, one in their teens. Murdered by these folks who were let out of jail mandatory early without any ability for the parole board to stop it. So in March, we put forward a bill that said this has got to stop. And people who commit these crimes have to stay in jail for their full term. If they're going to be let out, they should be let out by the parole board, a group of professionals that are appointed to assess this and see if they've really been reformed and are ready to get out or they're not. But instead, the legislature decided it was mandatory, let people out. It made no sense when they signed it, and we need to get that done. In March, though, they did pick up the work pace a little bit. They had 2 voting sessions for the Assembly in March and 3 for the Senate, but still nothing big done. And so far in April, we're here today on April 19th, right? We're here today, April 19th. The Senate hasn't been in once this month yet, nor has the Assembly.